Is it working, Shelley? Okay, good. Well, I'll talk really, really loud, and maybe that'll make sure that you can all hear tonight. Can you hear in the very back there? Okay. Well, thank you for having us here tonight. We're going to talk about the medical and the psychological aspects of weight loss. And try to get my slide up here.
Bring it up here from the beginning.
Excuse us as we have technical difficulties. Okay.
Computer age.
Yeah, computer age. And my teenager isn't here to help me with it like he was this afternoon. So anyway, we're here to talk about the medical and the psychological aspects of weight loss. And particularly for those folks that are dealing with being overweight or obese or who are trying to maintain weight. Certainly weight loss can be a problem in medical situations or mental health conditions where the person isn't maintaining a healthy weight. They're underweight. And I just want to caution you about that. There's a whole continuum of weight, and we are going to focus on the folks that would like to lose weight or maintain a healthy weight. The weight loss industry, as you probably know, is a $100 billion industry in this country. Approximately 300,000 people die each year from diseases related to weight. This is because being overweight or obese is not so simple, as you probably all know. You're here with this organization and trying to maintain a healthy weight. Why isn't a simple problem to solve? That's because there's multiple factors involved in our weight. There's the medical or physical ones, there's genetic ones, family history, environmental ones, where you live, what kind of communities you live in, financial ones, motivational ones, as I'm sure you're all aware of, and psychological ones. We also know that eating is unlike any other addictive disorder. While you don't have to smoke cigarettes or use alcohol or drugs, we know that those are addictive disorders and they're very difficult to treat and to heal from. Yet eating, overeating and obesity are a little different because you still have to eat in order to live. So whether you have an eating disorder causing you to be underweight or overweight, it's very difficult. We'd like to define for you being overweight and obese. They're both labels for a continuum. Dr. Greiner, Dr. Mike's going to talk about the body mass index a little bit more, but being overweight is a body mass index of between 25 and 29.9, and obese a body mass index of 30 or higher. Why I tell you that is because of the next slides. The next slides you can find on the CDC or Centers for Disease Control website. And what we're going to show you tonight is the obesity trends in this nation, and I hope that it astounds you as much as it has astounded us as professionals. 2 years ago, I was in Washington, D.C. at a national psychological conference. We were showing these slides. It's amazing what we're going to see here in a few minutes as we click through maps of the United States, beginning in 1985, as you can see. The white states don't even have any kind of obesity data. And the data that we're looking at is the percentage of citizens in those states that have a body mass index of 30 or above, which translates to about a 30-pound overweight for a person about 5'4". So you can see in 1985, some states don't have data. Some are dark blue. That means 10 to 14% of the population is obese. And the light blue, which shows up as gray here on the wall, is about a little less than 10% obese in 1985. You go through 86, you see similar kind of demographics. Now you see even more states in the dark blue, meaning 10 to 14%. In 88, more, 89. Watch how it increases. Now we have even more in 1991. The light blue, or the light color, more than 20%. The orange, 25% or greater, and that's in 2004. 2005, we have a few states, West Virginia, Louisiana, Mississippi down in there, 30% or more with a body mass index of 30 or above. 2006, you can see here on the maps how dramatically this problem has grown in our country. And that's very alarming to a psychologist who's trying to help people control their behavior and a physician who is trying to help people with medical problems. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mike now so he can add some of the medical aspects for you, and then I'll take the microphone back and talk about psychological aspects.
Looks like we're on fire, but not in a good way, right? From white to all of this red. If you look at the demographics or how things in the States, historically the South has been fried white foods, if you think about starch and a lot of oils. That's probably where you impacts that. If you look at the East and West Coast, two things probably impact that. Income, people are able to afford more fruits and vegetables probably and tend not to eat more fried foods. And the other thing is they're more accessible. California obviously has a lot of the fruits and vegetables that are produced for the entire United States. The other interesting trend that some people have observed that as we go from 1990, and this trend actually probably started in 1984, some people think, and there's a couple relationships that they feel that they see, especially when we deal with teenagers and adolescents. Something that's called Nintendo started somewhere in about 1984, and children all of a sudden stopped playing in the front and backyards and started doing this kind of thing. And as they did that, they were much less active. And some people relate the rising obesity rate with that. The other thing is, if you think back to prior to 84, probably 80, how many cars did a family have? You know, a family had one car oftentimes, and oftentimes everybody else walked. Kids walked to school. I mean, how many of us joke about the grandparents that had to walk 20 miles to school, right? And then as we get older, we walked at least 25. I mean, we exaggerate that. But we did walk, and we were active, and we are much less active now than we were at that point. The other thing that probably happened is we went away from the source of our food. If you think about it, when I talk to somebody after they have their first heart attack, I say, if you can do one thing, stop eating out of boxes and stop eating out of cans. If you think back to your grandparents, or maybe even how your parents cooked food, didn't come out of a box very often, didn't come out of a can very often. And a lot of the things that we're dumping out of those boxes and those cans probably have things added to them that we don't know about, have added fats, added sugars, and added starches. So if you had one small little hint that you can use tonight, it may be avoid the box, avoid the can, because you really don't know what's in it all the time, and there may be more fat and carbohydrate, sugar, than you think that there is. The other thing that happened was something called high-fructose corn syrup. And it's not a slam at our farmers in Iowa. It's been a great product. But high-fructose corn syrup began to sneak into the national food chain starting about 1984. As we went away from fatty foods, when we realized that fatty foods caused heart attacks, we began replacing fat in those cans and boxes with sugar. And so what happened was our fats went down, but our sugar numbers started to go up. This just talks about the issue of the obesity rate in young children, which we really are trying to battle. I know nationally we're trying to change what's happening in lunch programs at schools also. There's a lot of great pilot programs where they're trying to give children just one serving of a main course and then have some kinds of fruits and vegetables so that they can eat all of them they want. They even have kindergartners in Montana that like broccoli, if you can believe that. So what happens with obesity? I mean, obviously you're all concerned, either a loved one that you know has it or you have the problem yourself. All of these diseases occur. High blood pressure, dyslipidemia, fancy name for high blood fats, and type 2 diabetes. Obviously heart disease, stroke, gallbladder disease, arthritis, just because you've put more weight on your frame, so to speak, than there should be. Also sleep apnea and respiratory problems. Sleep apnea is where you stop breathing at nighttime because you're so heavy that your airway blocks because the fat's making your airway smaller. And then finally, some cancers may be related to fat ingestion and being heavy. If you're heavier and a woman, you store more estrogen in your fat than a woman who is thin. That estrogen can carry over even after menopause and can increase your risk for endometrial cancer and for breast cancer. Here's just a really quick look at the whole question of this thing called metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is if you have 3 of the 5 conditions that we list here, which are abdominal obesity. And abdominal obesity is probably the easiest measurement for obesity. We use 3 basic ones. Number 1 is the body mass index. The number that Dr. Greiner talked about being somewhere less than 25 being normal, more than 25 to 30 as being overweight, and then more than 30 as being obese. The easiest way to think about it, the lower the number, the more you look like a stick. The bigger the number, the more you look like a ball. Easiest way to think about it. The other one that we can use is called a percent body fat. Oftentimes you'll hear athletes talk about percent body fat. It probably is the least accurate for most of us because percent body fat will also measure fat that's inside your muscles, which really doesn't show on your tummy and your backside, but it's still there. And then the final one is the abdominal girth. It's really easy. You look at your belly, you look at your hips. If your belly's bigger than your hips, you're at higher risk. It's quick, it's easy. You can almost tell by looking at yourself or looking at your friends. High blood pressure is also part of metabolic syndrome. Low good cholesterol, high blood fats, and also a high blood sugar. One of the biggest problems we face with this metabolic syndrome is if you get 3 of these, it's not just like 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. Getting these guys is like 1 + 1 = 10. If you get diabetes, your risk of having a heart attack is just as high as the risk of having a heart attack if you've already had one. So if you know someone that's had a heart attack or had a stent, you might think that they're really bad off and you've just got diabetes. Your heart is in the same shape as that person that's already had a heart attack. So we can modify those by helping to maintain your weight. Oftentimes, we all think there's magic out there somewhere, and unfortunately, there's no magic in weight loss, as you probably know and I've learned. It basically comes down to intake and output. Intake is what you put in, and output is what you burn. And how do you burn calories? Well, your brain burns some, but mostly it's your muscles, your activity, okay? So the bottom line is, if you're going to lose some weight, something has to give. The input has to go down, or the output has to go up. There are some things that make making the output go up difficult. If you have really bad arthritis, or if you're really, really overweight and can't move, then all of a sudden you're having a harder and harder time increasing that output. And so all of a sudden you have to decrease your input so much that you feel like you're starving to death. And so one of the goals is if we can intervene before you can't do activity, because activity is the bonus. Activity is what's going to help you to lose more weight than almost anything else. You want to talk about the food pyramid?
Go ahead.
The food pyramid used to be this stack of basically the 5 basic food groups, and we go from the bottom to the top. And what they're really trying to do now is say, there really isn't a horrible, bad food that you can't have. You can have about anything, but be smart about your choices. And if you go to mypyramid.gov, if you're on the computer, if you go to the library and use the computer, I think you can really learn a lot about foods. And as you learn about foods, you find out about their composition and their structure. And you find out that there is no magic food like cabbage soup that makes you lose weight. That the bottom line is that it really is how many calories are in that food. And by looking at that, it will help you to learn. One quick and easy thing, so we got the can and box rule that we talked about, right? The other one is, what's your plate look like? So you put your plate down and you say, okay, what color is it? Is it white? Is it starch and potato and a little bit more starch, or is it colorful? And if you have a colorful plate, more than likely you're getting a lot of those good things that you get out of fruits and vegetables. And by doing that, you're going to decrease some of those carbohydrates that you get and some of those fats. Go ahead.
Sure. So what we try to talk with people about is make it a priority in your life to learn about food choices. And I think that your organization offers you a monthly magazine or maybe a bi-monthly magazine. And I would really suggest that you do read that and that you take all the knowledge you can from that publication. Also, we talk with people about challenging their false food facts. I think all of us grew up thinking, oh, this isn't very fat or this is really good for you. I know that I had a family member say, oh, Jell-O or gelatin is so good for you and is so nutritious and everything. And I said to Dr. Greiner, is gelatin really all that nutritious? And he said, no, who told you that? Well, and it's not that it's bad for you, but the person was under the belief that it was really a nutritious dish for you. So you may have those in your background. And the way you can challenge them is try to learn more about food choices and try to see, oh, is that really all that good for me? You can seek professional guidance from a dietitian. I know the physicians can make that possible or hook you up with a dietitian. You can seek knowledge from your weight loss groups, and you can use the USDA food pyramid that was just on the screen a few minutes ago. It's really a great interactive site. That food pyramid used to be something that they would just give you and that you were supposed to learn or memorize. And now they have changed it so dramatically just within the last couple years that if you have internet, or if you can go to the library, and they'll have classes at the library and learning how to use the internet even, you can put in your own height and weight and your own data, and it can bring out menus and tips and tricks and everything. And so I recommend that you also look at that. So you need to find a balance between food and activity. We know that becoming healthier isn't just about eating less or eating the right things. Most of the weight loss studies that have been completed in the last few years talk about the success of a weight loss program is linked to increased physical activity. As one publication said that I read, there are 1,440 minutes in every day. Use 30 of them at least for exercise. So there are certainly psychological factors too that are involved in weight and weight loss. Our thoughts and feelings influence all of our behavior, and that includes our food choices, our physical activity levels, and ultimately then our weight. Some psychological factors in weight that we're going to talk about tonight are stress in eating, the barriers to physical activity, and those being mostly cognitive barriers, self-monitoring of behaviors, and the psychology of portion size. 1 in 4 Americans turn to food to alleviate stress. I don't know if any of you do that, but 1 in 4 of us does, and I must admit that I'm one of those 4. 31% of women say that they are comfort eaters, and 19% of men. Comfort eaters are more likely to experience hypertension and high cholesterol. They're more likely to experience high levels of stress symptoms, fatigue, nervousness, irritability. Stress levels are higher for frequent fast food eaters. While only 13% of people who did not eat at a fast food restaurant in a certain week during a survey are very concerned about stress, the number rises to 21% of those who ate at a fast food restaurant. And that, I'm not trying to knock fast food, but I think what it indicates is that when you're stressed, you aren't planning, you're running through a fast food restaurant, and you probably aren't eating as healthy as you could. Stress in eating. So if stress is prompting our eating, then we need to look at ways that we can cope with stress in a healthy fashion. I think it's important first to identify the stressors for yourself. Look for triggers, events, or areas of your life that are stressful. This sounds kind of like a no-brainer, like, oh yeah, sure, identify the stressors. Yeah, of course I would. This is often a really difficult thing for people when they come in to see a psychologist, to identify what it really is that's making you feel stressed. And once you can identify it, you have a lot better chance of coping with it successfully. So don't forget that step. Then it would be important to identify how you do cope with stress. Do you overeat? Do you stop exercising? Do you isolate yourself, pull back from your friends and your family? Do you drink alcohol? I find it very common in the folks that are coming to see me for therapy that when they're feeling the most stressed is the time where they do stop exercising, they isolate themselves, they drink alcohol. At the time that you most need to be doing the things that are healthy for you, we tend to not want to do them. So I encourage folks to think of healthy ways to cope. Maybe exercise. Exercise is great, not only for your weight, but for your mental health. In fact, we know as psychologists that if you are depressed, that if you do nothing else but exercise, your depression will likely be lifted. Now, I'm not telling you that that's the only way or that's what you should rely on. If a person's on medication or in therapy, they need to continue those things according to their doctor's guidelines. But oftentimes, exercise relieves depression and is certainly good for weight loss. I also want to caution you that when you start using healthy ways of coping, it is difficult. It's a behavior change, and behavior change is not done easily. And so it's important to use baby steps, start out gradual, be patient with yourself, forgive yourself when things don't work out. Oftentimes when we're trying something new, it doesn't work out, and I've seen far too many people feel bad about it and then just quit. So forgive yourself and try again. I thought this quote was kind of interesting. If you can find a path with no obstacles, it probably doesn't lead anywhere. In other words, a lot of things in life are pretty hard, and there are going to be obstacles. And if we can see them as opportunities versus obstacles, we'd probably be a lot further ahead. Have you ever thought about exercise, that your days are just too busy, that you can't make time to exercise, and that no one I know exercises, so I'll have to do it myself, or that you're just too tired after work? I'd like to exercise, but I can't get started. You can kind of read through the list here, and probably some of those apply to you as well as to me. So how about if we think the thoughts that are in white instead? I think that'd be much more helpful and probably activate us and get us going. Instead of saying, my days are so busy, I just can't make time to exercise, think about, there are 1,400 minutes in a day. I can find 30 minutes to exercise. How about, no one I know exercises, so I have to do it by myself. Find somebody to exercise with. Find somebody who also hasn't been exercising for a while. Use the buddy system. Start together. Here's my exercise buddy over here. You see how tall he is? So when he walks, then I chase him, and then I get a lot of exercise. But it's important. We're finding psychologically that exercise, like walking on a treadmill, can be so boring, or walking alone sometimes can be boring, or swimming alone can be boring. And if you can add some part of enjoyment, of visiting, or looking at nature, or some aspect of it, or doing gardening, or something that has some thought or focus behind it, you're much more likely to keep going. I'd like to exercise, but I can't get started. That's often something that we hear. And again, start small and work up to a bigger routine. Here's top 10 reasons for not exercising. Again, real similar to what I showed you before. So if you haven't exercised for a while or been very physically active, you probably do want to consult your physician, as well as in regard to the other suggestions we're giving you tonight. Begin with a low to moderate intense activities. Choose an activity you enjoy and vary your activities. Even if that activity is going to the mall and walking a little bit, going to a store, holding onto the cart so that you don't fall, and walking, anything to change your activity level is going to be helpful. You might consider water exercise or going to our pool here if you have some orthopedic issues or if you're afraid of falling. If you fall in the water, what happens? Not a whole lot. Well, if you could swim or the water isn't too deep. But I know a lot of people are afraid of falling. I have a family member who is real concerned about that. So water exercise might be for you in that case. And again, begin with short periods of time and build up. And don't forget to reward yourself when you've done a good job. Self-monitoring is an important part. We know that individuals with eating problems are generally less aware of their experience of hunger and satiety cues. They don't taste things exactly the same, and their feelings of fullness are kind of out of balance. So research shows us that you have to be monitoring at least 75% of the time your input and your physical activity level. And if you don't do that, you're not very likely to succeed. And what I mean by self-monitoring is using a journal or a food log or an activity log. And I don't know if your publication for your group has space for that or gives you some forms to do that. But if they do, I'd recommend that you use that. You need to take the personal focus, just like an athlete would on training, and move away from mindless eating. I don't know if you are like me and have done this or have seen folks do it. Mindless eating is when you just take the whole bag of chips and you're just sitting there and you're watching TV and they're just going in. Or it kind of reminds me of that old cartoon Popeye, and didn't he have Wimpy that would just eat hamburgers one after the other? And And that is something that we encourage people to move away from because, again, if it's just mindless, you don't even know what's going in sometimes. Wear a pedometer. Be a scientist about your own activity. Again, that self-focus, which some might see as obsessive, can actually be helpful to you. It can run the whole gamut the other way, and you can become too obsessive about your weight. And I'm not encouraging that, but a moderate amount of obsessiveness about your weight is important. Practice mindful meditation. We're learning in psychology that when we help folks lose weight, by having them focus very much so in a relaxed, meditative type experience on what they're eating, they tend to eat less. And so again, at the dinner table, enjoy what you're eating rather than maybe having arguments with your family members or watching TV or something. Focus on what you're eating. The psychology of portion size. I'm sure that you all know that since the 1970s, portion sizes have been getting larger and larger, and they often use the word big somehow in the advertisement. I won't say anybody's particular product, but you know the big items. And unfortunately, consumers are largely ignorant about healthy portion sizes. I know that Dr. Greiner often talks about a deck of cards and using that as an example of about how much a meat portion should be. But oftentimes we're not very wise about what that is. Experts state that the popularity of big portions involves two factors. One is that the consumers desire value or a good deal, and the other part of it is that marketers love to capitalize on that. So in a movie theater, if you've got a choice between large and medium popcorn, and large is only 40 cents more, you might choose large because it's a really good deal. You know, only 40 cents more and it's large. And the food vendors love it because they've probably only spent 5 cents in the extra popcorn, but charged you 40. That's quite a good return on their money. We know that the bigger the portion size, the more the person will eat or use. Dr. Rolls in a study, I think Rolls is kind of funny for a weight loss type of a name. But anyway, Dr. Rolls did this study about macaroni and cheese. He gave 50 people 4 different portion sizes of macaroni and cheese over a period of time and found out that no matter what size they had, they always said that they were full and they ate it and they were satisfied with it. So you begin to see, oh, how could that be? They were satisfied with the big portion size just the same as the small? Something's going on there psychologically. Wasink and Park did a popcorn study that's much the same, a large and a medium popcorn. People, whatever they were given to eat, ate the whole thing and said that was an appropriate size for them and completed it. Wansink then began to think, is it just food that we're talking about? So he carried his study further to laundry detergent. He had some subjects have big containers of laundry detergent, and some subjects have smaller, regular-sized containers of laundry detergent, and found that the more detergent you were given, the more detergent you used. Same goes for dog food in a study that they did. If you got a huge bag of dog food for your dog, you gave the dog more food than if you had a regular bag. So again, I think you can see the psychological aspect in that. Some psychologists have suggested that for portion control, rather than trying to limit the portions and make us all feel like, oh, I'm not getting very much, that we add volume to our portions. For example, on a sandwich, you might want to add lettuce, tomato, onion, pickle, and so that you feel like you have a lot more volume and you have a portion that's satisfying to you, but it doesn't have a lot of calories. Food experts are also trying to get food companies to add more air or low-fat fillers to foods that we typically buy. This expert said that in a Snickers bar, we could probably add 10 to 15% of filler, and most of us would never know the difference. So here are some sources that we use for the presentation tonight, and they are all public sources that you can get on. I'm sorry that the website didn't come out as bright, and so if you have trouble reading it and want it, we can show it to you later. But the American Psychological Association has a public website with a lot of different topics for the public, obesity being one of them that you can click on. Certainly the CDC has a whole section about weight loss and weight control. The Food Pyramid, as well as the Obesity Society, has a nice website where you can get further information. So that's what we have for you tonight, and I know that we offered both of us to answer questions, and we will take them from the floor. If you want to approach us afterwards, that's fine too. We just wanted to make sure that we were available to you, and we would do our best to answer whatever you might have. Sure.
So for me, for the conclusion, I think the big thing is, well, where do you start? I think we all ask that question. There's a group that studies weight loss in Boulder, Colorado, and some of you may have heard this from me in the past, but don't look at that body mass index and say, oh my gosh, I'm 32, and that means that I'm 50 pounds overweight, and to get to a body mass index of 25, I have to lose 50 pounds. If you go out and do that starting today, and you lose the 50 pounds, you have a 90% chance that you will fail. I don't mean to be negative, but it's the reality. So if you're starting today or tonight, or if you're continuing on your journey, my suggestion to my patients, and would be to you tonight, is take 10% of your current weight. Lose that 10% reasonably and in a slow fashion. Hold that off for a year. And if you can do that, you will have done better than 90% of the population in the United States that's tried. And you'll be a champion to yourself, and you will have done well. And if you're doing well at that point, then you can lose a little bit more. So I think set that 10% goal, and if you can do that, I think you'll do really, really well. One other thing to talk about real quick is that the whole portion thing. So this boredom eating thing happens all the time. You know, you walk up to the refrigerator, the cabinet, and I always ask my patients to do three things. If you get your hand on the door, ask yourself, why am I here? Am I hungry? Am I bored? Am I depressed? Ask yourself that first, that introspection. And then if your hand gets on something, and hopefully it didn't, but if it does, just look at it for a second. And then after you look at it, roll it over. And the reason you're going to roll it over is because all that nutritional information is on the back. And then look at it and say, Oreo cookies. 3 have 240 calories. And ask yourself, I walk 30 minutes today to burn 240 calories. Do I want to ruin it all with 3 cookies just because I'm bored? And I bet you'll put them back. And it's those little lifestyle choices that'll make a difference. And it is lifestyle. It's not the D word. Did you hear the D word tonight? No diets. It's really lifestyle. And if you can maintain that, you'll do really, really well. Questions?
You made a statement that if you're diabetic, that your heart, it's like you already had one heart attack.
Your risk for having a heart attack in the next 2, 3, or 5 years is equal to that risk of someone else that has already had a heart attack. And so because of that, we now recommend that your cholesterol levels, if you're diabetic, be as low as that person that has already seen the cardiologist for a heart attack. So if we say that your bad cholesterol, your LDL, for most people, 130, if you're diabetic or if you have had a heart attack, we lower that LDL level to 70, which is a big drop. But we know that by dropping that LDL level, the bad cholesterol, down to 70, we're going to decrease your risk of heart attack significantly. Yes, Dave?
Yeah, I've gone through the cycle myself several times, and I know a lot of people that did lose the weight, feel great, and they eat and hold it off for a couple of years. Here it is right back again, it creeps back up, and somehow you wonder how that happened. And it goes into this lifestyle change, and I think that's the real challenge. It's hard losing weight, there's no question about that, but then to me it's harder keeping it off and not creeping back into those bad habits. And I'm just wondering, this probably ties into some psychological thing, that not identifying the stresses or something, that you're not making the right changes.
And portion creep, I think, is the other thing that happens. When you start looking at what real portions are, cottage cheese is a half a cup. pasta is 1 cup cooked. As Dr. Greiner talked about, it's the filler that's going to make the difference in all this, whether it's a sandwich or whether it's on your plate. Some of the small hints are, your protein should be the size of a deck of cards. Know what the portion sizes are. You can almost fit a half a cup of cottage cheese on a tablespoon if you try really hard. Dig it down and it's kind of mound it up. It's only a spoonful, and then you put it down. Or it's an 11-inch dinner plate instead of eating off of your salad plate. Everything gets dwarfed a little bit, and so if you can eat off a salad plate, if you can use a spatula that maybe is the size of the piece of protein, the fish or the meat that you're having or chicken that night, if you can use a spoon in the mashed potatoes or in the vegetables that is close to what your portion size should be, all of those little things will be reminders to you as you go ahead and plate up your food for the evening.
I think psychologically, too, we tend to only congratulate ourselves or praise ourselves when we achieve this big goal, like we lose weight. No, we did a good job, and so now we've done it, and we're going to not worry about it anymore, like we do in many things in life. We passed the CPA exam, and so now we're a CPA, and we don't have to worry about that anymore. But with weight loss, again, it's a much different focus. It's the lifelong focus, and I think if we can start learning how to compliment ourselves or reward ourselves or praise ourselves for just those moderate, everyday achievements in it, that maybe we have a better chance of maintaining it. Others? Jay?
Yes, you mentioned reward several times now, and I was wondering, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is the Snickers bar. What would you recommend? I mean, because I don't want to go out and buy a shirt every time that I get successful in an exercise period or something.
All right, all right.
What do you do for rewards?
Well, maybe it is something that you already have at home. Maybe you do get to watch the TV program that you want to do, or maybe you do get to read a book, or maybe you do get to go for exercise. I know you don't want to get into the habit of buying things all the time, like, you said, a new shirt. I did have a graduate school colleague that used to reward herself with a pair of earrings every time she would really do well on a test, thinking, oh, the earrings aren't so expensive. I can do that every once in a while. So, yeah, we certainly don't want to reward with food, but there might be things that aren't too costly that you could think about that would feel pretty good to, like, satisfy or be a reward for you. And I can't quite tell you, everybody's going to have to kind of think for themselves. I know for me, being a busy mom, a reward is being able to sit down and watch a TV show through it. The whole show is a reward. Other questions?
What about food substitutions? I mean, there's a lot of sugar substitutes and other kinds of substitutes.
And some have really good review, and some have lots of bad reviews. It really comes down to flavor and taste for you and choices, I think. As you look at that food pyramid, there's not going to be a bad food or a good food. It's the amount that you get. That Snickers bar, it's 240 calories, and the question is, what does it represent to you? If you feel cheated because you didn't get something, you're not going to be successful. And so in order to not feel cheated, you have to find that balance that works for you. For me, I on the weekend, I relax a little bit more than I do on the weekday. Weekday, I try to be a little bit more vigilant. On the weekend, I might let myself have a little bit more. That's one thing people will do. The food substitutes aren't bad, and specifically, the two biggest ones in the sugar area are going to be aspartame, and the other one is Splenda. Splenda basically is a sugar that you don't absorb. Almost all chemicals in the world exist. This is going to be a little boring, but it's kind of fun. Kind of like right and left gloves, okay? And usual sugar is like your right glove, and you absorb it. What they do to Splenda is they basically reverse it to make it like a mirror image, and you don't absorb the mirror image. Now, the nice thing about it is it's heat stable, so as opposed to NutraSweet, which you can't get hot because it breaks apart, the reverse sugar is great because you can heat it and you can use it in your baking. So from that standpoint, it's great. The only downside is if you get too much of it, sometimes it'll pass downstream because you don't absorb it, and bacteria start having a party on it. And the party is called fermentation. And fermentation can make gas and alcohol, and that isn't pleasant in your colon. It just isn't. The other sweetener aspartame kind of has gotten a bad reputation, and it's unfortunate it has, because really it's probably the most studied food additive that we've ever introduced in the United States. And interestingly, it really is only 2 amino acids. Now, amino acids are building blocks of protein. So if you take a piece of chicken or fish, it is a whole bunch of these 20 amino acids all hooked together, just like Tinker Toys. Aspartame is just 2 of those that are hooked together with what's called a methyl group. And it's really not a very stable molecule. In fact, if you have Diet Coke in the South United States and it gets very hot, it actually breaks apart in the can, and the Coke won't taste very sweet to you because it's already broken apart. You don't absorb NutraSweet into your body. It gets into your intestine, it falls apart before you know it into 2 small little pieces, which you get from your piece of meat or from your fish or from whatever else you ate. And that small amount of what's called methyl group just passes out. So both of them are pretty safe. But some people don't feel that they taste the same, and you make choices then. And you say, well, I like real butter better than margarine or better than the Parquet that has water whipped into it, and I make a choice there and make another choice another way.
Other questions?
Excuse me, you compared a piece of meat to a deck of cards
Correct.
for an adult, or a difference in people's weights, and does it make a difference? Or?
Not a huge amount. I think we have a warped sense of how much protein we need in our diet in the United States. We eat a lot more protein than most other cultures do. And we're not that protein dependent. Our muscles really use sugar as the gasoline, if you want to think about it that way. Proteins and fats ultimately can be broken down into that, but it takes a lot of energy even to do that. So the protein needs are not nearly as high. If you're building up muscle mass, it can be. But for most of us, that amount of protein really is enough, and it isn't even necessarily that body size dependent.
Why are there's been a lot of talk of carbs and starches as being bad. Why is that the case?
What's happened with carbohydrates and starches is they all have the same chemical formula, C6H12O6. We all probably learned it in school. They all then are hooked together to make what are called long chain or complex or short chain sugars. So no matter where your sugar is going to come from, whether it's sweet corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, if there's a starchy chemical in it, that starch is basically a really, really long chain of sugar. And your digestive system is going to slowly break it down. Now, if you think about 50,000 years ago, before real civilized society happened, and you woke up underneath a tree or out of a cave and you said, I'm hungry, what did we eat? Well, there might have been a dead piece of something outside, and you might have had that, or you might have grabbed some grass, some grains. You might have been lucky enough to find a hive with a little bit of honey in it, but we didn't find very many simple sugars or starchy sugars. And the problem is that our pancreas, which is the organ that helps us make insulin, and insulin helps the sugar go into our cells, hasn't really changed over that time. But as we talked about earlier tonight, we've gone from taking these grains, which have lots of fiber and lots of other nutrients in it, we strip all that away, all that nice brown stuff on the outside, we take all of that off and we're left with that white part on rice and on wheat and on white flour and white potatoes and white corn. And what we're left with is the sugar that's absorbed very, very quickly. When that goes into our stomach, our pancreas says, yay, there's starch, there's carbohydrate. It doesn't know that it was really, really simple sugar that is absorbed really, really quick. Your pancreas makes lots and lots of insulin, but the sugar goes away really, really fast because it isn't nearly what your body thought it was. So all of a sudden, the sugar's gone and your insulin level is high. And that high insulin level makes you hungry. And the first thing you're going to do is grab a snack. Now, if you grab a snack and you're hungry and it's midday, what are you going to grab? Something out of a bag, a carton, a box, or a can. Going to be more of that white starch, and you're just going to feed your pancreas. It's going to make more insulin, and you just get hungry all the time. So high fibers, vegetables, fruits, things that slowly digest, slowly leak out, if you want to think about it, the sugar, and that slowly leaked out sugar feeds your body all the time instead of making it go up and down and up and down. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
You.
Yes?
I was just wondering if you would you mind telling us, I know you were a little heavier when I first met you, I was wondering if you could tell us how much weight you lost.
I topped out at about 273, and I'm down to about 230 now, 228 maybe. And I started exercising probably 5 times a week, running on a treadmill, and then just being conscious about portion sizes. But it's a daily battle. I've had a battle this summer. We've had a busy summer, and I've gained weight this summer. And just as Dave said, you have to reanalyze, you have to recommit, you have to focus and ask yourself, what am I doing? Why did I do it? Am I stressed? Am I depressed? Am I too busy? Am I not focusing on the things that I need to do? Am I eating too fast? Some people would suggest that you shouldn't eat unless you're eating at your table. You know, some of that mindless eating that occurs for you, like the other Dr. Greiner was talking about. Yep, you grab the bag of chips, you pop down on the sofa, and you just start doing this. If you sit at the table, it's a little more formal. The other thing we do in our culture is we eat so quickly. I find when we get stressed, as we did this summer, you eat more quickly. And if you eat more quickly, it takes 20 minutes for your stomach to tell your brain something went in there. And if you go to Europe or other countries, they eat at a much more relaxed pace. You know, we fly through that place with the arches, with the supersized stuff. Oops. And how fast do we shove it in? I mean, it's gone. I mean, their chairs were designed to have us stand up and leave in 10 minutes. They're not comfortable for a reason. They want you to eat quick, get out, so they can fill the seat with somebody else. It serves a purpose at times, but if we eat so quickly, our brain never gets an idea. So our eyes feed us instead of our stomach and our body knowing what we really need. I know it sounds simple, but it really comes down to that. It's lifestyle and awareness. And there's no magic food. I wish there was. Anyone else? Well, thank you very much for having us.
Thank you again.